The war had been raging for what felt like an eternity, though in reality it had only been 3 years. The human fleet had ventured too far into the uncharted reaches of space, driven by ambition and a desperate need for resources to sustain their overpopulated homeworld. They never expected to encounter another intelligent species, let alone one as advanced and formidable as the Zytherians. The alien race called themselves the Eternal Starborn, though humanity had dubbed them Zytherians after the first planet they clashed on, Zithyrus Prime. Their technology was unlike anything humans had ever seen. Ships that shimmered like liquid silver darted through battlefields with impossible speed, firing beams of energy so precise they could slice through steel while leaving fragile lifeforms untouched nearby. But it wasn't just their weapons or ships that made them terrifying. It was their queen. Queen Lysara ruled her people with a wisdom that bordered on divine. She was ancient, even by Zytherian standards, her elongated body encased in iridescent armor that seemed alive, shifting colors depending on the light. Her voice carried authority not just because of its tone but because every word she spoke resonated deep within those who heard it, bypassing language barriers entirely. To look at her was to feel both awe and fear simultaneously, a paradoxical mix that left many soldiers questioning whether they were staring at a goddess or a monster. Humanity's initial attempts at diplomacy had failed spectacularly. Misunderstandings led to skirmishes, which escalated into full-scale battles when neither side backed down. Earth's military leaders believed surrender would mean extinction, while the Zytherians saw humanity's refusal to yield as proof of their barbaric nature. Each side became more entrenched in their hatred, each loss fueling the fire of vengeance until peace seemed like nothing more than a distant dream. Yet despite the chaos, there were moments of quiet reflection amidst the carnage. Soldiers on both sides began to question why this war continued, especially since no clear victor emerged from any engagement. Rumors spread among the human ranks about the Zytherian queen, a being said to possess unimaginable power yet also rumored to seek resolution rather than destruction. Some whispered that if anyone could end the bloodshed, it would be her. On the front lines, Captain Elias Drake found himself caught between duty and doubt. A decorated soldier known for his tactical brilliance, he had risen quickly through the ranks during the conflict. Yet as time wore on, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong with how things were unfolding. He'd lost friends, comrades, mentors, all sacrificed in the name of survival. But what kind of survival came at such a cost? One evening, under the dim glow of twin moons on an alien battlefield littered with wreckage, Elias stood overlooking the devastation. His helmet rested under one arm, sweat dripping down his face despite the cool night air. Behind him, medics worked tirelessly to save the wounded, their cries mingling with the distant hum of repair drones tending to damaged ships. It was here, standing amidst the aftermath of another brutal clash, that Elias realized something crucial. Wars weren't won solely through force. If humanity wanted to survive, they needed to find another way. Little did he know, fate was already weaving threads that would bring him face to face with the very personification of hope, and perhaps salvation, for both warring races. The summons came unexpectedly, delivered not by a messenger drone or encrypted transmission, but through a direct mental link that jarred Elias awake in the middle of the night. At first, he thought it was a nightmare, a voice echoing inside his mind, rich and commanding, yet strangely soothing. "Come to me," it said, simple words layered with meaning far beyond their brevity. The sensation was overwhelming, like standing beneath a waterfall of pure emotion. Fear, curiosity, and an inexplicable sense of obligation surged within him all at once. When the connection broke, leaving only silence behind, Elias sat upright in his bunk, heart pounding. Around him, the temporary barracks were quiet except for the rhythmic snores of his fellow soldiers. No alarms blared, no alerts flashed across his wrist console. Whatever had reached out to him existed outside conventional communication channels. And yet, he knew without question who, or what, it had been. Queen Lysara. Dressed hastily in standard-issue fatigues, Elias reported to command immediately. General Hargrove listened skeptically as Elias recounted the experience, his weathered face betraying little emotion. "You're saying she contacted you directly?" Hargrove asked, leaning back in his chair. "Not through intermediaries, not via some hacked signal, but straight into your head?" Elias nodded, his throat dry. "Yes, sir. I don't know how, but it was unmistakable." Hargrove exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. This smells like a trap. Why would their queen single you out? You're good, Drake, but you're not exactly high profile. I can't explain it, sir, Elias replied earnestly. But I think we have to consider this might be genuine. What if she wants to talk peace? Or what if she wants to capture our best tactician? Countered Hargrove, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely dismissing the possibility. After a tense debate, the decision was made: Elias would go, not alone, but accompanied by a small escort team equipped with every defensive measure available. They traveled aboard a sleek reconnaissance vessel, its cloaking systems engaged as they approached the coordinates provided by the Queen's mysterious call. The destination turned out to be a remote moon orbiting a gas giant, its surface barren save for a massive crystalline structure jutting skyward like a shard of frozen lightning. As they landed, Elias felt a strange calm settle over him, though his pulse quickened with anticipation. The airlock hissed open, revealing a surreal landscape bathed in hues of blue and violet. Standing before them, framed against the towering crystal spire, was Queen Lysara herself. She moved gracefully toward them, her presence radiating power and poise. Her elongated form shimmered faintly, and her multifaceted eyes seemed to pierce through layers of reality itself. "You've come," she said aloud this time, her melodic voice carrying effortlessly across the distance. "I am pleased." Elias stepped forward, acutely aware of the weight of the moment. "Your Majesty," he began, bowing slightly. "Why have you summoned me?" Lysara tilted her head, studying him intently. "Because you are different from the others of your kind. You carry the scars of war but do not let them define you. You question where others obey blindly." She paused, then added softly, "And because I believe you may understand what I am about to propose." 4 hours, they spoke inside the crystalline chamber, seated on translucent platforms that hovered inches above the ground. Lysara explained her vision, a union between their species, not merely through treaties written in ink but through bonds forged in flesh and spirit. "If you want peace," she said finally, her gaze locking onto his, "you must marry me now." The room fell silent. Elias, this wasn't just about alliances or political maneuvering. It was about trust, vulnerability, and bridging the chasm between two civilizations that had spent years trying to destroy each other. "What happens if I refuse?" Elias asked cautiously, though part of him already knew the answer. "Then the cycle continues," Lysara replied, her tone heavy with sorrow. "More lives will be lost. More worlds will burn. Is that truly what you desire?" He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked around the chamber, taking in the intricate carvings etched into the walls, symbols of unity, growth, sacrifice. For the first time, Elias allowed himself to imagine a future where humanity and the Zytherians coexisted rather than clashed. It was a fragile hope, barely flickering against centuries of mistrust and violence, but it was there nonetheless. When Elias returned to the human command center, the atmosphere was electric with tension. News of his meeting with Queen Lysara had spread quickly, and opinions divided sharply. Some viewed the proposal as a miraculous opportunity, a chance to end the war without further loss of life. Others saw it as a dangerous gamble, a potential betrayal of humanity's sovereignty. General Hargrove convened an emergency council session in the main briefing room. Officers, diplomats, and scientists filled the space, their expressions ranging from cautious optimism to outright hostility. As Elias recounted the details of his conversation with the Queen, murmurs rippled through the crowd. When he repeated her ultimatum, that peace depended on his marriage to her, the room erupted into chaos. "This is madness," shouted Colonel Rhea, slamming her fist on the table. "We're talking about binding ourselves to an alien species through something as personal as marriage? What guarantees do we have that this isn't some elaborate scheme to infiltrate our leadership?" "It's not just about us," argued Dr. Elena Vasquez, the lead xenobiologist present. "Think about the implications. If this works, it could set a precedent for cooperation between our species. We've tried everything else, diplomacy, warfare, and nothing has brought lasting results. Isn't it worth considering?" Captain Marcus Hale, one of Elias's closest comrades, stood up, his face pale but resolute. "With respect, ma'am, we're asking a lot of Drake here. Marrying someone, anyone, isn't a decision you make lightly, let alone under these circumstances. Are we really willing to sacrifice his future for the sake of a gamble? The argument swirled around Elias like a storm, each voice louder and more impassioned than the last. He remained silent, his hands clasped tightly together, feeling the weight of countless expectations pressing down on him. He understood the skepticism. He shared it, to some extent. How could anyone trust an alien queen offering peace through matrimony? Yet, deep down, he also felt a pull, a conviction that this might be the only path forward. Finally, General Hargrove raised a hand, calling for order. The room gradually quieted, though the tension lingered palpably. "Drake," Hargrove said, fixing Elias with a steely gaze, "this isn't just your decision anymore. It affects every man, woman, and child back home. If you agree to this, you'll be walking into uncharted territory. You'll represent humanity in ways none of us can fully comprehend. Can you handle that?" Elias took a deep breath, steadying himself. "Sir, I won't lie, I'm scared. This isn't something I ever imagined doing. But if there's even a chance this could stop the fighting, don't we owe it to everyone who's suffered to try?" His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Slowly, heads began to nod around the room. Not everyone agreed, but enough voices softened to suggest a tentative consensus. The council adjourned with a plan to draft formal terms for negotiation, contingent upon Elias's acceptance of the Queen's proposal. Later that night, Elias sat alone in his quarters, staring at the stars visible through the viewport. The enormity of what lay ahead pressed heavily on him. He thought of the faces of fallen comrades, the families torn apart by grief, the endless cycle of destruction. Could one person truly change the course of history? Or was he simply deluding himself? Before he could dwell further, a soft knock sounded at the door. It was Lieutenant Ava Reyes, a communications specialist who had served alongside him since the early days of the war. She entered hesitantly, concern etched across her features. "Hey," she said softly, closing the door behind her. "How are you holding up?" Elias managed a weak smile. "Honestly, I'm not sure. This feels bigger than me." Ava sat down beside him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You're stronger than you think, Elias. Stronger than any of us. If anyone can pull this off, it's you." Her words offered a glimmer of reassurance, but they also underscored the loneliness of the road ahead. No matter what happened next, Elias knew he would walk it largely alone. The preliminaries of the treaty negotiations unfolded in a grand hall within the crystalline spire, its walls pulsating faintly with an inner light that lent the proceedings an almost ceremonial air. Representatives from both sides gathered around a circular table carved from translucent stone, their postures tense yet respectful. On one side sat human delegates clad in formal uniforms, their expressions guarded but hopeful. Opposite them were Zytherian dignitaries, their elongated forms adorned with flowing robes that shimmered like liquid starlight. At the head of the table stood Queen Lysara, her presence commanding yet serene, while Elias occupied a seat beside her, acutely aware of the scrutiny directed his way. The discussions began with cautious exchanges, each party outlining their demands and concerns. Humanity sought assurances, guarantees that their sovereignty would remain intact, that cultural assimilation wouldn't erode their identity, and that trade agreements would benefit both sides equally. The Zytherians, for their part, emphasized mutual respect, environmental stewardship, and a commitment to shared technological advancement. Both sides agreed on broad principles, but the devil, as always, lay in the details. One contentious issue arose when the topic of military disarmament came up. Humanity insisted on retaining a defensive force to protect their colonies, fearing vulnerability without it. The Zytherians countered that maintaining armed fleets perpetuated mistrust and undermined the spirit of unity the treaty aimed to foster. Voices rose, tempers flared, and for a moment, it seemed the fragile accord might shatter entirely. It was then that Queen Lysara intervened, her voice cutting through the discord like a blade. "Enough," she declared, rising to her full height. "We cannot build peace if we cling to the tools of war. Trust must be earned, not demanded. Let us begin with transparency, open access to each other's technologies, unrestricted oversight of military operations, and gradual reductions in armaments over time. Only then can we move forward together." Her words struck a chord, silencing objections and forcing both sides to reconsider their positions. Elias watched in admiration as Lysara navigated the delicate balance between firmness and empathy, her leadership unwavering yet compassionate. He realized, not for the first time, that she was not merely proposing marriage as a symbolic gesture. She was offering herself as a bridge, a living embodiment of compromise and understanding. Yet, despite the progress made, doubts lingered beneath the surface. Back in the human delegation's quarters, murmurs of dissent grew louder. Some feared that agreeing to such sweeping reforms would leave Earth exposed to future aggression. Others worried about the cultural ramifications of integrating with a species so vastly different from their own. Even among those who supported the treaty, unease simmered. What if the Zytherians interpreted humanity's concessions as weakness? What if the marriage itself proved unsustainable, fracturing the fragile alliance before it could take root? Elias bore the brunt of these concerns during private meetings with his superiors. General Hargrove grilled him relentlessly, probing for weaknesses in the proposed terms. What happens if she changes her mind? Hargrove demanded one evening, pacing the length of the briefing room. What happens if this whole thing turns out to be a ploy to destabilize us from within? I don't know, sir, Elias admitted, exhaustion evident in his voice. But I do know that staying stuck in this cycle of war isn't working either. We've tried everything else. Isn't it worth taking a risk? Hargrove stopped mid-stride, pinning Elias with a hard stare. You're gambling with more than just your life, son. You're gambling with the fate of billions. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on Elias's shoulders once again. He knew Hargrove wasn't wrong, but he also couldn't ignore the flicker of hope ignited by Lysara's vision. Perhaps peace required sacrifices that defied logic, that transcended fear. Perhaps love, in its most unconventional form, held the key to unlocking a brighter future. As the final draft of the treaty took shape, Elias found himself spending more time with Lysara, discussing not just logistics but philosophy, art, and the shared dreams of their respective peoples. Their conversations revealed unexpected commonalities, values rooted in resilience, creativity, and a desire to leave a better world for future generations. Slowly, tentatively, a bond began to form between them, fragile but undeniable. Still, shadows loomed on the horizon. Rumors circulated among the human ranks of factions opposed to the treaty, whispers of sabotage or rebellion. Meanwhile, subtle signs hinted that not all Zytherians welcomed the idea of uniting with humanity. Resistance bubbled beneath the surface, threatening to boil over at any moment. In the midst of these uncertainties, Elias clung to one truth. The path to peace was fraught with peril, but turning back was no longer an option. Whether the treaty succeeded or failed, history would remember this moment as a turning point, a chance to rewrite the narrative of two warring civilizations. And for better or worse, he was at the heart of it all. The eve before the official signing ceremony arrived, casting a golden hue over the crystalline spire as twin suns dipped below the horizon. Inside the grand hall, preparations buzzed with frenetic energy. Technicians adjusted holographic displays, diplomats rehearsed speeches, and security teams conducted meticulous sweeps for potential threats. Yet amid the flurry of activity, Elias found himself retreating to a secluded balcony overlooking the alien landscape. The view stretched endlessly before him, a tapestry of jagged peaks, iridescent rivers, and swirling nebulae painting the sky in fiery shades. It was breathtaking, almost otherworldly, yet it offered little solace. Standing there, Elias allowed himself to confront the whirlwind of emotions he'd suppressed for days. Fear gnawed at him like a persistent shadow. What if he failed? What if this monumental step toward peace collapsed under the weight of mistrust or miscommunication? He thought of the countless lives depending on him, the hopes pinned to his shoulders, and the crushing realization that he might not be strong enough to bear them all. But fear was not the only emotion stirring within him. Doubt crept in too, whispering insidious questions. Was he doing this for the right reasons? Was he sacrificing his own happiness for the greater good, or was he simply running away from the pain of loss and failure? Images of fallen comrades haunted him, their faces frozen in moments of courage, their laughter silenced forever. Could he honor their memory by forging a new path, or was he betraying it by abandoning traditional methods of conflict resolution? And then there was Queen Lysara herself, a figure both enigmatic and compelling. In the short time they'd spent together, Elias had glimpsed facets of her personality that defied easy categorization. She was regal yet approachable, commanding yet gentle. There were moments when her eyes seemed to hold galaxies of wisdom, and others when they reflected a vulnerability that reminded him she was, after all, still sentient and fallible. He respected her deeply, admired her vision, and even felt a burgeoning affection. But was that enough to sustain a lifelong commitment? Could love bloom from duty, or was he fooling himself into believing it could? These thoughts churned relentlessly as night fell, wrapping the spire in a cocoon of silence. Exhausted, Elias returned to his chambers, only to find Lieutenant Ava Reyes waiting for him. Her expression was unusually somber, her usual confidence replaced by a quiet intensity. "We need to talk," she said, stepping aside to let him enter. Once inside, she closed the door firmly behind her. "There's something you should know." Elias frowned, his instincts immediately on alert. "What is it?" Ava hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "There's unrest among the troops. Not everyone supports the treaty, or you. Some see this as a betrayal, an abandonment of everything we've fought for. Whispers are spreading, and, well, tensions are high." Elias sighed, sinking into a chair. "I figured as much. People are afraid of change. They don't trust the Zytherians, and they don't understand why this has to happen." "It's more than that," Ava pressed, kneeling beside him. "There are rumors of mutiny. A faction within our ranks believes the treaty is a trap, that marrying the Queen makes you a liability. They're talking about drastic measures." The implications hit Elias like a punch to the gut. Mutiny? Against him? The thought was almost laughable, yet the gravity of Ava's warning sank in quickly. If dissidents acted on their fears, the consequences could unravel everything they'd worked so hard to achieve. "What do you suggest?" he asked, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. Ava placed a hand on his arm, her grip firm. "You need allies, Elias. Trusted ones who will stand by you no matter what. I'm with you, obviously, but you'll need more. Reach out to those who believe in the cause, who see the value in what you're trying to accomplish. Build a network of support, quietly, discreetly." He nodded, appreciating her pragmatism. "Thank you, Ava, for telling me. For everything." She smiled faintly, though worry lingered in her eyes. "Just promise me one thing. Don't lose sight of why you're doing this. No matter how hard it gets, remember the lives at stake. Remember the hope." As Ava left, Elias sat alone once more, grappling with the enormity of the challenge ahead. The doubts and fears hadn't disappeared, they likely never would, but neither had his resolve. Tomorrow, he would stand before representatives of two warring species and pledge himself to a future neither fully understood nor guaranteed. It was a daunting prospect, but perhaps that was the essence of bravery. Moving forward despite uncertainty, trusting that the act of trying mattered more than the outcome. With a heavy heart but renewed determination, Elias prepared for the day that would redefine not only his life but the destiny of two civilizations. Whatever happened next, he vowed to face it head-on, carrying the weight of hope and the burden of responsibility with equal measure. The morning of the signing ceremony dawned with an eerie stillness, as if the universe itself held its breath. Elias awoke to find his quarters bathed in soft light filtering through the crystalline walls, casting prismatic patterns across the floor. For a moment, he allowed himself to simply sit on the edge of his bed, staring at the shifting colors. It was beautiful, fragile, much like the piece they hoped to forge today. But beauty and fragility often went hand in hand, he mused, a reminder that even the most radiant things required care to endure. Dressing in his formal military attire, Elias felt a surreal disconnect between the man he saw in the mirror and the role he was about to play. The uniform, adorned with medals earned in battles now rendered obsolete by this new path, felt heavier than ever. Each pin and stripe seemed to whisper of sacrifices made, lives lost, and the countless decisions that had led him here. Yet beneath it all pulsed a quiet determination. Whatever happened next, he would not falter, not for himself, but for everyone counting on him. When he stepped into the grand hall, the atmosphere was electric. Delegates from both sides filled the chamber, their murmurs creating a low hum that reverberated off the translucent walls. Queen Lysara awaited him at the center of the circular table, her iridescent armor catching the light in ways that made her appear almost ethereal. She turned as he approached, her multifaceted eyes meeting his with a gaze so penetrating it felt like she could see straight through to his soul. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice carrying a weight that transcended mere words. Elias swallowed hard, nodding once. "As ready as I'll ever be." Together, they moved toward the dais where the treaty documents lay waiting, illuminated by a beam of light descending from the spire's apex. The parchment, or what passed for parchment in Zytherian culture, was inscribed with flowing script in both human languages and the intricate glyphs of the Starborn. As Elias took his place beside Lysara, he scanned the room, noting the mix of anticipation and apprehension etched onto every face. Some watched with hope, others with thinly veiled skepticism. Among them, Lieutenant Ava Reyes stood near the back, her presence a silent reassurance. She gave him a subtle nod, and he drew strength from it. General Hargrove stepped forward first, clearing his throat before addressing the assembly. "Today marks a pivotal moment in our history," he began, his gravelly voice steady despite the gravity of the occasion. "For too long, humanity has waged war against the Zytherians, believing survival meant domination. But we stand here now because two individuals dared to imagine another way, a future built not on enmity, but understanding." His words hung in the air, met with nods of agreement from some and stony silence from others. When Hargrove finished, a Zytherian elder rose gracefully, her elongated form draped in shimmering robes. Her speech flowed melodically, bypassing language barriers entirely as her thoughts resonated directly within the minds of those present. "We are beings of stars and stories," she intoned. "Our histories are written in light and shadow, triumph and tragedy. Today, we choose to write a new chapter, one of unity." Applause rippled through the crowd, tentative yet heartfelt. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for, the signing itself. Elias and Lysara approached the dais together, their steps synchronized despite their vastly different physiologies. As Elias reached for the ceremonial stylus, his fingers brushed against hers briefly, sending a jolt of electricity coursing through him. Was it nerves? Or something deeper? He couldn't tell. With deliberate strokes, they each signed their names, or symbols representing their identities, on the document. The instant the final mark was made, the chamber erupted in cheers and applause. Lights flared brilliantly overhead, bathing the room in radiant hues that seemed alive with celebration. For a fleeting moment, Elias allowed himself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, they had truly turned a corner. But as the festivities unfolded, unease lingered beneath the surface. Amidst the congratulations and diplomatic pleasantries, whispers of dissent continued to circulate. A group of human officers clustered near the exit, their expressions grim as they exchanged hushed remarks. One of them glanced sharply at Elias, disdain evident in his glare. Nearby, a Zytherian diplomat muttered something under her breath to a colleague, her gestures sharp and dismissive. Elias caught snippets of these exchanges, enough to confirm Ava's earlier warning. Not everyone was willing to embrace this new era of cooperation. Some viewed it as capitulation, others as folly. And while the majority celebrated, the minority seethed, their discontent simmering dangerously close to boiling over. Later that evening, during a private reception hosted by Queen Lysara, Elias found himself drawn into conversation with one of the more vocal opponents of the treaty, Colonel Rhea. She cornered him near a display of alien flora, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "You realize what you've done, don't you?" she said, her tone biting. "You've tied our fate to theirs without any guarantee they won't turn on us the moment it suits them." "I understand your concerns, Colonel," Elias replied evenly, though his jaw tightened. "But doing nothing guarantees only more bloodshed. We had to try something different." Rhea snorted derisively. "Different doesn't mean better. Mark my words, Captain, this will end badly. And when it does, people will remember who led us down this path." Her words struck a nerve, but Elias refused to let her provoke him further. Instead, he offered a curt nod and excused himself, retreating to a quieter corner of the room. There, he encountered Dr. Elena Vasquez, who offered a sympathetic smile. "Don't let her get to you," she said gently. "Change is always met with resistance. What matters is that you're giving peace a chance. I just wish I knew if it was enough, Elias admitted, running a hand through his hair. Sometimes it feels like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff, hoping someone will catch me if I fall. Vasquez placed a reassuring hand on his arm. Maybe no one can promise you that. But sometimes, taking the leap is the only way to find out. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Queen Lysara, who glided toward them with an elegance that commanded attention. "Captain Drake," she said, inclining her head slightly. "May I have a word?" Excusing himself from Vasquez, Elias followed Lysara to a secluded alcove overlooking the crystalline gardens below. The view was breathtaking, but neither of them paid it much mind. "I sense your turmoil," Lysara said after a pause, her voice softer than usual. "Do you regret your decision?" Elias hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Regret isn't the right word. More like uncertainty. "I know this is the right thing to do, but that doesn't make it easy." Lysara regarded him thoughtfully, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the starlight streaming through the ceiling. "Peace is never easy, Elias. It demands sacrifice, trust, and faith in possibilities unseen. You carry a great burden, but you are not alone. Together, we will navigate this uncharted path." Her confidence bolstered his resolve, though doubts still lingered. As the night wore on, Elias found himself oscillating between moments of hope and flashes of doubt. The road ahead was fraught with challenges, and the shadows of resistance loomed large. Yet amidst the chaos, there was also a flicker of something else, a tentative connection forming between him and Lysara, fragile yet promising. By the time the reception drew to a close, Elias felt drained but resolute. Tomorrow would bring fresh trials, new obstacles to overcome. But for now, he allowed himself a small measure of peace, knowing that whatever lay ahead, he had taken the first step toward a brighter future. The days following the signing ceremony passed in a blur of activity. While the official documents had been ratified and celebrated, the real work of implementing the treaty began almost immediately. Transition teams were formed, tasked with establishing protocols for resource sharing, cultural exchange programs, and joint scientific endeavors. Every decision required careful negotiation, as centuries of mistrust couldn't be erased overnight. Yet amidst the logistical challenges, there were glimpses of progress, human engineers collaborating with Zytherian artisans to design hybrid technology, children from both species learning each other's languages through interactive holograms, and shared celebrations marking milestones that once seemed impossible. For Elias, however, the personal stakes remained ever present. His marriage to Queen Lysara was not merely symbolic. It was meant to serve as a living testament to the unity their people sought. Preparations for the ceremony moved forward swiftly, blending human traditions with Zytherian customs in ways that honored both cultures. The event would take place within the crystalline spire, under the same radiant light that had illuminated the treaty signing. But as the date approached, Elias found himself grappling with an unexpected sense of vulnerability. On the eve of the wedding, he stood alone on the balcony where he'd first confronted his fears. The alien landscape stretched before him, bathed in the soft glow of twin moons. Behind him, the hum of activity inside the spire served as a reminder of how much rested on this union. He thought about the lives lost during the war, the sacrifices made by those who believed peace was worth fighting for. And now, here he was, standing at the precipice of something entirely new. Ava joined him quietly, her presence grounding him as it always did. "You look like you're carrying the weight of two worlds," she said with a faint smile. "Feels like I am," Elias admitted, leaning against the railing. "What if this doesn't work? What if we can't bridge the gap between us?" Ava placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression earnest. "It won't be perfect, Elias. No relationship is, not even one between two humans, let alone between you and, well, her. But perfection isn't the goal. Trust is. If you can build that foundation, everything else will follow." Her words lingered in his mind long after she left him to his thoughts. Trust. It wasn't just the cornerstone of their marriage, but the essence of the entire treaty. Without trust, none of this would endure. And so, when dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and lavender, Elias resolved to step forward, not out of obligation, but out of hope. The wedding ceremony unfolded with a solemnity that transcended words. Human dignitaries and Zytherian elders gathered beneath the towering spire, their diverse forms united in purpose. Music filled the air, a hauntingly beautiful blend of human strings and Zytherian resonant tones that seemed to echo across dimensions. As Elias walked down the aisle, flanked by Ava and General Hargrove, he felt the eyes of countless beings upon him, their hopes and fears intertwined in his every step. At the altar stood Queen Lysara, resplendent in ceremonial armor that shimmered like liquid starlight. Her gaze met his, unwavering yet tender, and for the first time, Elias felt no trace of doubt. Whatever uncertainties lay ahead, they would face them together. The vows themselves were simple yet profound. In human tradition, Elias pledged to honor and cherish Lysara, to stand by her side through joy and adversity. In return, Lysara spoke in the melodic language of her people, her words resonating directly within his mind. I vow to guide you, to learn from you, and to forge a future where our differences become our strength. When the final blessing was given, the chamber erupted in applause and cheers. Lights danced overhead, mimicking constellations come alive, while delegates from both sides embraced in celebration. For a moment, the divisions that had defined their histories melted away, replaced by a shared vision of what could be. Yet the true test came not in grand ceremonies or diplomatic gestures, but in the quiet moments that followed. In the weeks and months after the wedding, Elias and Lysara worked tirelessly to nurture the fragile bonds between their peoples. They traveled together, visiting devastated colonies and war-torn planets, offering aid and fostering dialogue. Along the way, they faced resistance, from extremists on both sides who viewed their union as an abomination, from bureaucrats unwilling to relinquish old prejudices, and from the inevitable misunderstandings that arose when two vastly different cultures collided. But through it all, they grew closer. Late-night conversations revealed layers of vulnerability neither had expected to share. Lysara spoke of the burden of leadership, the loneliness of carrying the hopes of her people on her shoulders. Elias confessed his fears of inadequacy, of being overshadowed by the enormity of his role. Together, they discovered that love, true, enduring love, wasn't born solely from passion or convenience but from mutual respect and the willingness to grow. One evening, as they stood together on the balcony of their shared quarters, watching the stars twinkle in the distance, Lysara turned to Elias with a rare smile. "Do you remember when I first asked you to marry me?" she said, her voice tinged with amusement. Elias chuckled softly. "How could I forget? At the time, I thought you were either insane or trying to trick me." "And now?" she asked, tilting her head curiously. He paused, considering the question. "Now, I think maybe you were right. Sometimes, the hardest choices lead to the most meaningful outcomes." Lysara reached out, her slender fingers brushing against his. "We have much work ahead of us, Elias. There will be setbacks, losses, moments when it feels like we've failed. But as long as we keep choosing trust over fear, I believe we can create something extraordinary." Her words resonated deeply within him, echoing the same conviction that had driven him since the beginning. Peace wasn't a destination. It was a journey, one that required constant effort and unwavering faith. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, Elias knew they were walking it together. As the years passed, the alliance between humanity and the Zytherians flourished. New cities rose from the ashes of old battlefields, designed collaboratively to reflect the best of both cultures. Children grew up without knowing the hatred that had once divided their ancestors, their laughter ringing out in harmony. Stories of Captain Elias Drake and Queen Lysara became legend, tales of courage and compromise told across galaxies. In the end, history remembered them not just as leaders who ended a war, but as pioneers who dared to imagine a world beyond conflict. Their love, a bond forged in the crucible of chaos, proved stronger than any weapon, more enduring than any empire. And as they stood side by side, gazing toward the infinite expanse of the cosmos, they knew their legacy would shine brightly, a beacon of hope for generations to come.